Hi, everyone. Coming up, with so many discussing Donald Trump's power over the Republican Party, they're ignoring his power over Democrats. Two tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic social media posts last night from the former president, sending Democratic House candidates scurrying to respond, racing to point fingers at one another, all over a joke, showing just how much better Trump is at the political game than so many Democrats. But first, breaking tonight, the judge who signed the FBI search warrant on Mar-a-Lago just allowed the release of several new documents related to that search. And we have them. The cover sheet for the warrant, the DOJ's motion to keep the warrant under seal, and the judge's order agreeing to seal it. Now, the DOJ did not contest releasing those documents, and as expected, they don't contain much in the way of new information. The meat of the Justice Department's investigation, what it calls its roadmap, is inside that still, at least as of tonight, under seal affidavit. But bravo to Judge Bruce Reinhardt, who today announced he plans to release portions of that affidavit, which was used to justify the raid on Mar-a-Lago. The judge not moved by the Justice Department's arguments in court today for total secrecy, instead signaling that he thinks there are parts of the affidavit, which he's obviously seen, that could and should be made public. And so now we will likely get to see some of that document. In court today, Jay Bratt, the DOJ's counterintelligence chief, declared that, quote, this investigation is open. It's in its early stages. And the government has, quote, found probable cause that there was a violation of one of the obstruction statutes. Now remember, the warrant, when it was unsealed last Friday, showed 3 criminal statutes the government was investigating. One of them was obstruction of justice, which is a crime with a possible 20-year sentence. The DOJ arguing here that any disclosure of the affidavit would jeopardize that investigation. Attorneys for the other side, which in this case were several major media companies who'd filed motions seeking to unseal the affidavit. Today, the judge ruled against the DOJ, well, sort of. The judge is giving the DOJ until next Thursday to propose redactions. The judge will take a look. If there's a disagreement on what can and can't be made public, the DOJ can ask for an appeal, etc. The point here is that we'll likely see some of the affidavit. The question remains how much, when, and what will we really learn from whatever's not redacted. Judge Reinhardt saying in court today, quote, if there's a disagreement between the government and me, obviously I win. Now, one of the more underreported parts of the story is who else was in court today, a voice that could have had a significant impact on the judge's ruling and how much the public actually gets to see of that affidavit. And that is the voice of Donald Trump's own legal team. Christina Bobb, the senior legal representative for Trump during the raid at Mar-a-Lago, and whose signatures on the FBI property receipts of what was taken, was in court but just watching. She's been on nearly every cable news outlet, including this one, discussing the case. But his team filed nothing in support of the affidavit's release, despite the former president posting this week that, quote, in the interest of transparency, I call for the immediate release of the completely unredacted affidavit pertaining to this horrible and shocking break-in. But then why not file a motion in court to back that up? I predicted they wouldn't file. They didn't. Look, I've sided with many Republicans in saying that to maintain the public's trust, at least some of the warrants should be released, because the not knowing is driving a lot of damaging speculation. We need to know why the government and the court felt there was a compelling reason to send FBI agents into the private residence of a former president. It's a fair ask from the American public. I get that there need to be redactions for the sake of the investigative process, and the judge obviously agrees. And I'm glad that he appears to have rejected the DOJ's absolutist position. And Trump's team, by sitting back in court, lose nothing. Public calls for transparency are a lot different than filing formal court proceedings or filings, which actually could have an impact on the judge's decision. But what makes the silence of the Trump legal team hypocritical was this fiery statement immediately after the court hearing, saying in part, quote, President Trump has made his view clear. The American people should be permitted to see the unredacted affidavit relating to the raid and break-in of his home. Today, Magistrate Judge Reinhardt rejected the DOJ's cynical attempt to hide the whole affidavit from Americans. However, no redactions should be necessary, and the whole affidavit should be released, given the Democrats' penchant for using redactions to hide government corruption, just like they did with the Russia hoax. Putting aside that as a legal matter, no one believed that the unredacted warrant could or should be released. But more importantly, then, why didn't they make this argument in a court of law instead of just the court of public opinion? They could have swayed the judge, but they didn't do it. Joining me now is John Sale, former assistant special Watergate prosecutor, and Kami Chavis, former assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. Thank you both for coming on the program. Appreciate it. All right, so John, you apparently have recently turned down the Trump team's request to join the legal team there. What do you make of the strategy here, where on the one hand, in public, they're calling for transparency, but yet not filing a motion in court?
Well, there are two agendas that are going on, and they try to coexist. There's the political agenda, and there's the legal agenda. And the prosecutors are devoting a full time to this one investigation. The reason that I declined, I think this is an opportunity of a lifetime, was I have a busy practice, and I couldn't take on all the complex issues. But I sort of think that the Trump legal strategy is be careful what you ask for. I mean, I'm not sure they really want this unredacted affidavit in public. It's a one-sided accusatory document, and what was already has been released has been nothing. I mean, it's told us nothing. Let me say one other thing before. I've represented a lot of individuals, companies who are the subject of search warrants. I've never gotten an affidavit, partially redacted, not redacted, never. And I've tried a few times, not many, because the answer is usually no.
I got to follow up on something you said, which is that you thought it would be the opportunity of a lifetime to work on Trump's legal team, but you're too busy. You have to understand that people are going to hear that and say, "Come on, he's too busy to take on the case of a lifetime."
No. That could sound wrong. That could sound like, "Oh, Mr. President, I'm too busy for you." That's not what it is. It's that I think it requires a full-time commitment. I think it requires a team, the equivalent of the government's team, and it would require me to just stop all the things I'm doing right now. At a different time of my life, I could have done that. So I don't at all mean to sound cynical or arrogant, but it just, there are so many issues. There are so many exciting issues.
All right.
For example, the documents. Neither side knows what they have. And the government now is going through a so-called taint process. There are a myriad of privileges. It's not just attorney-client privilege. There's executive privilege. There's the deliberative process privilege. And I would have asked for a special master. I would have opposed the government doing it themselves. That's just one issue. The interaction with the different statutes. That's what I'm saying. It is a full-time.
I want to bring in Cami. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to bring in Cami. Cami, what do you make of the judge's decision today? He seems to have kind of split the baby here, but in a way that I think makes a lot of sense.
Yes, I agree. I do think it makes a lot of sense. As John was saying, that it's highly unusual to have an affidavit uncovered or unsealed. You usually don't get that. And the reason, again, the government has made those arguments that it gives a roadmap to the investigation. I think even if the affidavit, certainly the judge does want to unseal portions of it, and we're going to see some redactions, you're not going to see confidential informant information, things like that. But still, some of the things that could be revealed, we always say, we don't want to give the alleged criminal or the defendant here an opportunity to change their ways and to help the government, and I'm sorry, to hinder the government's
But one of the big arguments, Cami, that people typically make as to why you don't release these kinds of affidavits is because it can prejudice the person who's being investigated. And we don't know necessarily that it's Donald Trump per se who's being investigated. It sure seems to be that way. We shall see. But Donald Trump is taking a very public position here where he's saying, hey, release it. Could that be used, even though he's not making a filing in court? Could that be used if he were to later say, well, this was very unfair that they released this affidavit against me?
Well, again, we have the court of public opinion, and then we have the court of legal opinion. And legally, unless you make those arguments in court, they're not going to hold any sway. So he's absolutely, I think, trying to have the public have some sympathy here for him.
John, what do you think happens from here? How much are we going to learn from this redacted affidavit?
I think it's going to raise more questions than it's going to provide answers. We're not going to learn anything about informants. We're not going to learn anything about witnesses. We're not going to learn where the government's going next. they've already told us this is just the early stages of the investigation. But I think in the court of public opinion, the Trump team will say, unfair, we want transparency. But as I said, this is a one-sided, search warrant is granted one-sided. There's nothing good about the subject of the search warrant that's going to be in that affidavit. Nothing favorable, nothing exculpatory.
Yep. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.